President Trump is going to war with his own party, not over foreign policy, the conflict with Russia, or the inflation crisis hitting Americans. No, it's over the Epstein files, something that President Trump has described as a hoax. But what is really going on, and is the Epstein situation the virus that he just can't seem to shake? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Now, smash that subscribe button if you appreciate this kind of coverage, and let's get right to it. Okay, so check it out. This is, there's been a huge push lately by the actual victims of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And what's fascinating about this is that because the victims have repeatedly said that the individuals who victimized them, right, were so powerful and so well connected that they really fought pretty tirelessly to preserve their anonymity. And this includes filing court filings as Jane Does, and oftentimes using all the legal protections they could get. But the ability of the president to not just avoid accountability for his associations with the notorious sex trafficker, but also the rehabilitation and kid gloves that his number two person, Ghislaine Maxwell, has been treated with, has forced them essentially to come out publicly and say, listen, we want this information out in the public, which is directly refutes the administration's own stances for not releasing the Epstein files. They say, well, we need to ensure we can't put them out in public because the victims don't want them to be out there. They don't want this information out there. Well, literally, the victims are standing on the front steps of the White House being like, nah, dog, tell them about who did these things to us. Tell them about what this is. So you got to give them credit for standing out there and being like, yeah, the most petty, childlike president of all time, who is protecting someone in the Epstein list. And they're still out there being like, yo, you gotta release these files, right? Literally, one of the accusers had originally in court filings been identified as minor victim number one, now standing on the steps being like, hey, my name is Marina Lacerda, and I was one of the dozens of girls. This is a direct quote from her. Dozens of girls that I personally knew were forced into Jeffrey's mansion on 9 East 71st Street in New York City when we were just kids. Today is the first time I ever speak publicly about what happened to me. I was 14 years old when I met Jeffrey, right? And it is the stories here. You should take away, one of the things you should take away from them is that, they have a lot of details that just wouldn't be possible, right? And remember, a lot of these court filings, they predate, in a lot of cases, Trump's presidency. Again, a lot of them a lot of these investigations go back long before Donald Trump was a U.S. president, right? So, these are women who there is robust evidence that they were trafficked, lots and lots of statements from them. Again, before this, there was ever a sort of anti-Trump political movement, right? And so you have to give this a different set of credibility, right? It's one thing when someone is a politician's attacked by their opponents. You're like, okay, people tend to stretch and play games with the truth, but when you see stuff like this, where it predates them being a political figure at all, you got to give it more credibility, right? And here's the thing. The most damning part of this is the White House's own level of cope. So look at this, right? There has been a move or continues to be a move by Republican Thomas Massie and Democratic Representative Ro Khanna, both of whom are pretty well known for being willing to go against their party establishment, particularly in issues of basic integrity. Ro Khanna is famous for pushing for a congressional stock trading ban, something that would negatively impact the Speaker of the House, or the former Speaker of the House, California Representative Nancy Pelosi, who's famous for being actually one of the most prolific options traders. She doesn't even trade stocks. She trades risky options that would really only be possible to make money on with insider knowledge. So these two kind of rogue representatives have been pushing to actually get a quorum of a majority of representatives to force the release of the Epstein files, the whole thing unredacted to the House. And the Trump administration, of course, whose official position, by the way, is that the entire Epstein scandal is a hoax. It's a fiction made up by Democrats. The president has said actually that the files were simply generated fictionally by Hillary Clinton, which you got to give Hillary credit. If that's true, she also put Bill Clinton in the files herself, which is a truly power move if there ever was one. But the fact is that again, Trump, their official stance, he says, quote, helping Thomas Massie and liberal Democrats with their attention seeking while the DOJ is fully supporting a more comprehensive file release from the Oversight Committee would be viewed as a very hostile act to the administration, a White House official said, right? Both White House officials and GOP leaders are working behind the scenes to stave off an internal revolt from rank and file Republicans on the Epstein matter, right? One far-right rabble-rouser, I love this, Representative Ralph Norman said a White House official called him directly to see how he would vote on an Epstein resolution. He replied that he wouldn't sign the petition, but would support it if Massie and Khanna collected 218 signatures to get it to the floor, right? When they get 218, I'll vote for it, Norman said. But he wouldn't be part of the discharge effort, right? What I don't like about this, it's just an I hate Trump bill. The discharge position is nothing more than an I hate Trump bill. Well, not if, again, the president says that he's not one of these Epstein people. So how is it an I hate Trump bill? How is releasing the files an I hate Trump bill? Do you see the problematic nature of this, of the president's own denials? Like, they're not even good. And interestingly enough, the Epstein victims themselves say, listen, we're just going to compare notes and we're going to compile our own Epstein list. And even if it's not everybody, because again, you're talking about decades old recollection of people who were children. You know, how many 14-year-olds can name a U.S. senator? How many 14-year-olds can name the CEO of a major bank, right? So it's not going to be perfect, but they are going to say, listen, certain major celebrities, they say we are going to be able to identify. And they're going to put out their own, what they call the Epstein list. But again, one of the things that we have said repeatedly on this channel and on everybody else is that there are robust civil cases that have documented at least credible allegations against all sorts of figures, whether that's people who appeared frequently on the flight logs, people who have one or more victims alleging that they were victimized by this person. You just have a host of these there are a host of people who have chosen to associate with him, right? And while, again, there is the standard of evidence for the DOJ bringing charges and convicting somebody, which is pretty high. But remember, that's not the standard by which we judge other people necessarily, and by the standards by which we make decisions, right? In civil court, a lot of these famous people have either lost or paid out huge settlements, which implies that they thought that forcing their accusers to weigh the evidence in open court would be more embarrassing than paying them at times huge sums of money. So again, you have a number of these well-connected people who, again, have various levels of associated with Epstein. But one of the most important is, of course, the president himself. And I want to pull this up here because this is pretty important, right? This is the document itself. This is, again, filed shortly after Trump became president, but it was compiled before then by a Jane Doe who describes in sprawling detail being one of Epstein's trafficked individuals. Everything she says aligns with everything else that is known about these the victims and kind of the way they operate. And she specifically alleges in 1994 that she was assaulted by then New York businessman Donald Trump. And what I want you guys to do is ask yourself, if you had a girlfriend or a boyfriend and you thought they were cheating on you, how much evidence would you need to know before you said, I think I was cheated on, right? Would someone have to say, oh, well, I love cheating on my spouse, or I love partying, or I love, I just love sleeping with other people. Would that be enough? What if a person was to credibly say, hey, I was the person your partner cheated on you with? Would that be enough? Right? And then apply that same standard to the president, right? Who, again, you have a person who is saying, hey, at this specific date and time, the president assaulted me. It was in the location of a known sex trafficker who the president said loves young girls as much as I do. One of his most notorious victims, Virginia Giuffre, was actually recruited out of Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Why was Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate employing 14-year-old girls as bathroom attendants? Isn't that just a little weird? Like, if it's not, would you let your 14-year-old girl work as a bathroom attendant? Do you see how problematic all of this is? How preposterous when you weigh all the evidence together? Again, don't use the standard of what is the DOJ willing to bring to court, because that's actually not that helpful. Because as we've seen, right? Like, look at the Casey Anthony lady who got off with killing her kid. You could beat charges on loopholes, and the DOJ sometimes will say, hey, there's a loophole, they're going to get away with it, right? Some statute of limitations, interstate law, whatever it is. But that doesn't mean something didn't happen, right? Instead, again, it's like your spouse cheating on you. Some people may say, listen, if I don't physically witness the act, my spouse didn't cheat on me. But for the rest of us, somewhere there's a magic line of evidence where we say, this is enough evidence for me to believe it, right? And apply that same standard of evidence to the evidence, honestly, about the president. And you'll come to the same conclusion I have, which is that if he were if I was to use that same standard of evidence, I would definitely believe that more likely than not, he sexually assaulted these women, right? Of course, his defense is airtight, saying that it's a Democrat hoax. And right, no matter what his other airtight defense, no matter what you do, it's going to keep going, Trump said. He added, I really think it's enough. Truly, guys, boy, it's really tough to discern the truth on this one. Also want to point out that in audio recordings from Jeffrey Epstein himself, right, Jeffrey Epstein described himself as Donald Trump's closest friend and claimed intimate knowledge of his proclivity for sex, including sleeping with his best friend's wives, right? These are recordings done by biographer Michael Wolff with Jeffrey Epstein before he passed away. This was in 2017, 2 years before I'm trying to not use the demonetized word. I'm going to get demonetized. Before he was found dead in his jail cell. Right? And, this is pretty damning, right? This is actually, in fact, Michael Wolff, even in this, alleges that Trump's wife was sort of put together by Epstein. That's how they met. And this is, again, recordings, over 100 hours of recordings of interviews with Epstein, including using him as a source for his Michael Wolff's Trump biography. And I point this out because, again, how much more evidence does a person want? In fact, here, a GOP representative, Mike Collins, was caught on a hot mic saying that Trump's in the Epstein files. This is from, again, Georgia, right? Georgia Rep. Mike Collins believes President Trump is mentioned in the Epstein files and wants the case files for the convicted sex offender made public. This is a Georgia Senate candidate, current representative, future or aspiring senator, said on August 13th in a Muskegon County GOP meeting on whether Trump was in the files. Collins replied that he believed the president was, quote, in there, but only because Trump was the one that was telling the FBI about it. Well, if that were true, then wouldn't Trump be clamoring to release those files to show that he was actually an informant with the FBI stopping a brutal child molester, right? And he had previously barred Epstein from Mar-a-Lago, which, as we know, was because Epstein recruited women out of Mar-a-Lago, which is kind of weird to be defensive about, right? Like, why would you, a billionaire, be mad about people recruiting people poaching your locker room attendants, Colin spokesperson defended this, saying President Trump was right about everything, kicked Epstein to the curb and did nothing wrong. Again, didn't release those files, boss. It's that easy. He won't, obviously, guys. At some point, we have to sit there and conclude, right, by the preponderance of the evidence that's publicly available, right? Because if there was non-public evidence that exonerated the president, he should release it. I'll change my stance, right? Evidence is evidence, guys. But that's not going to happen. We know that's not going to happen. He's going to fight tooth and nail to avoid releasing it, to use. And here's the problem. If you believe that the president was involved in trafficking these women, and his defense for this real allegation is that it's a hoax. It's a hoax. It's a hoax. It's a hoax. Then everything else that he called a hoax, you should probably go back and reinvestigate. And as we've said, there's robust evidence that his Russia problem is that he's also called a hoax was actually real, and that he just successfully obfuscated the Mueller report from 2016. Right? He effectively thwarted the FBI by just stonewalling them, which the FBI, again, went and detailed in their report. They said, yeah, we can't find criminal conspiracy, but he also stopped us from completing our investigation on 10 different occasions. So, again, you should sit there and say, okay, man, maybe there's a lot of other hoaxes that are as nothing burgers as the Epstein files. It's a troubling trend, to be sure. Guys, if you appreciate my content and you want to support me and keep me independent, you can do so by subscribing at combatvetnews.com. This is functionally my Patreon or my Substack, where twice a week we drop uncensored combat videos as well as Q&As for members. A huge thank you to our Colonel tier members, guys like Henry Russier, I Just Guy Called Chris Rossi, AL90, Sergey Zinchenko, D. Stewart, and all of our Lieutenant tier members. We couldn't do it without you guys. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.